Hey there, my name is AJ Pickett and I make videos about role-playing games, and lots of them. I upload twice a week with a live stream every weekend. You can also find me on Subscribestar, Patreon and Discord, Facebook and Twitter. Also, there's an option to join the channel as a member, and I welcome any questions you have in the comment section below. If you like this video or this channel, as always, hit that like button and subscribe if you would be so kind. A weird creature from beyond reality today. Also a request from a viewer who thought this would be a quick lore video. Well, so we shall see. The Thought Eater is sometimes found as a desiccated corpse of a very strange little creature that appears to have died of starvation. To most races on the world of Toril, they have no idea what a platypus is, so they don't automatically make any sort of comparison to them. Weird as the egg-laying venomous little duck-billed and furry platypus is, though, the Thought Eater is much more bizarre. Native to the border ethereal plane, which is where the deep ethereal plane begins to merge with the many spheres of the primaterial plane, the Thought Eater is a 3-foot-long, extremely gaunt psychic vampire. They are invisible to the beings of the primaterial plane because they never actually cross over fully into the primaterial plane if they can avoid it. And the scary thing is, they don't need to. They are one of the very few species that can exist in a trans-dimensional state and can actually attack and feed on creatures in the primaterial plane while they remain in a fully ethereal environment. They are very physically weak creatures. They have no forms of attack or defense other than being concealed in the border ethereal. This means they are fairly easy prey for other ethereal predators, and they just can't survive for very long if brought fully into the primaterial plane. Their attack is simply their attempt to feed. They are drawn to those with psychic abilities, those who can cast spells and channel arcane power, and those with a very high level of intelligence. Their feeding attempts are not done maliciously. They have a simple animal intelligence that responds to their ability to sense psychic, magic, and mental energies and close in on them stealthily to feed. This drained energy sustains them and allows them to remain constantly within the border ethereal plane. If they do run out of this energy and starve to death, they will simply pop back into the primaterial plane as a small but very real corpse. Likewise, if they get killed while in the border ethereal plane, they will still pop out of there and back into the primaterial plane as a desiccated corpse. The Thought Eater is invisible while it remains within the ethereal plane. It can move into the material plane fully as a movement action, but it won't do that unless it's facing certain death on the ethereal plane. The border ethereal overlaps the primaterial plane. Things look much as they are, but are misty and a bit fuzzy around the edges. Also, some objects that have been standing in place for years and only recently moved will often have an echo or ethereal shadow in the border ethereal plane, which is quite real to the creatures there. It's like it's holding the memory of the primaterial plane. The Thought Eater can pass through other creatures and objects on the primaterial plane as if they were simply difficult terrain, but it takes 1d10 force damage if it ends its turn inside an object. They will waft around the border ethereal seeking emanations. Often this will see them cluster around temporary demiplanes that are very close to the border ethereal, but the rest of the time they will sniff out food sources on the primaterial plane, sneaking up until they are within range. As an attack action, the Thought Eater targets one source of psychic or magical power, or a being of high intelligence within 60 feet of itself. The target must make a DC 14 intelligence saving throw or lose one psychic power point or one spell slot, starting from the highest level and working down to the lowest, or 1 point of intelligence. If the target's intelligence drops to 0, it dies. The Thought Eater will always drain psychic power first, arcane power second, or resort to draining intelligence last. It will feed on the target until either the target dies, escapes, or the Thought Eater is scared off by something that has detected its presence. The creature detects strong sources of psychic power, strong potential arcane power, and high levels of intelligence anywhere within 240 feet of itself as it drifts within the border ethereal boundary zone. They can sense thoughts, but they're not intelligent enough to understand them and have no capacity for language of their own. It may be possible for a powerful mage or psychic, perhaps a necromancer or a specific kind of grave domain cleric or undead patron warlock, to form a bond with these creatures, and I can imagine it wouldn't be too hard to learn to develop spells that could summon them by pulsing tasty energy into the border ethereal and then masking the summoner's presence from them, causing them to target other beings around them for their feeding. This could be a very useful way for such an individual to bring down a powerful magical effect that they would find impossible to overcome on their own. See, I've made a updated 5th edition listing for the Thought Eater. After looking carefully over the listings from older editions, and I thought the process could be simplified a lot without having to worry about converting specific old psionic powers or spell effects from older editions. And as I did so, I considered a very simple way to handle the little power leech like the Thought Eater feeding on existing spell effects or some other non-intelligent psychic or magical source. So I gave them the ability called Consume Magic. With this, if a Thought Eater gets within 10 feet of an ongoing magical effect or condition, they'll be able to slowly drain its power. The spell, psychic, or magical effect can make a saving throw. The DC is 10 minus the level of the spell power or power points of the psychic effect. But the DC increases by 1 point per round until eventually the Thought Eater drains enough magic to cause the effect to be dispelled. So you could say that a spell effect such as a Wall of Force, this is the 5th level spell, starts off with a save DC of only 5, so easy. But within 1 minute or 10 combat rounds, the DC is now 15, and 30 seconds later that Thought Eater is now feeding directly on the spell energy, draining 1 level of the spell per combat round, so within 30 seconds that Wall of Force just vanishes. While this is going on, if the Thought Eater was summoned by someone else, they're free to do whatever they want as they simply wait for the little varmint to do its thing. I would advise DMs to add a drawback here, such as the concealment that keeps the summoner safe also prevents them from casting spells, using psychic powers, or even making skill checks that are based on their intelligence. Not a terrible trade-off, all things considered, but it could be tactically dangerous. I've included a link to my homebrew listing for the 5th edition Thought Eater on the D&D Beyond website. Aside from its feeding ability, the Thought Eater really is a pathetic little creature. They're less capable of melee combat than a floating beaver. Who knows how these creatures came to be? My personal theory is that they are creatures once native to the prime material plane that became corrupted and mutated by exposure to the far realm. They became psychic parasites, and in the process became aware of the call of super powerful beings locked away within crystal prisons deep in the ethereal void, causing them to kind of burrow between the dimensions, and in doing so, they found a unique ecological niche. It made sense to me that if they had powers like Intellect Fortress and Thought Shield in older editions, that this could simply be represented by resistance to psychic damage and resistance to magic. Plus, since the ethereal realm has a lot of undead predators, resistance to necrotic damage would be logical. Other than that, they are feeble creatures with a challenge rating of 2, not particularly fast in the ethereal mists, swimming through the realm with their paddle-like feet at a speed of 20 feet per round. If they cross over to the prime material plane, they lose that flight and have to drag themselves along the ground, moving backwards as their head is so ungainly, they have to drag it behind them as they go. I'll leave the specifics of how long they can survive on the prime material plane to you. Perhaps they can seek out sites that are haunted by ghosts and create little ethereal pockets where they lay eggs and nurse their offspring on the psychic energies of the haunting spirits. Who knows? But the idea of a party of adventurers walking through a secluded forest somewhere close to a haunted house, and they just happen to run across a pack of these little things, but they have no idea they're there. They're invisible. And they're creatures that are slowly draining the intelligence of this party. So the most intelligent one amongst them starts to get stupider and stupider. I leave it up to you how you represent that and how horrifying that would be to the player characters and particularly to the players, because they have to roleplay their character getting stupider and stupider by the moment. Please hit the like button if you made it this far, subscribe if you like what I do, check out my Subscribestar or Patreon links for all the full scripts for these videos. Oh, by the way, intelligence of course can be restored by a short or long rest. Buy some Teespring merchandise, wear your geek with pride, and as always, thanks for listening. These creatures can be found by using the Detect Thoughts spell, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.